Hello, everyone. Welcome to ITSS Verona video series podcast. And hello, everyone from Igor Shepetun, Alessio Calzetti, Eastern European team. Today, we are honored to have Andrej Movchan. Andrej Movchan, one of the greatest experts in Russia and Eastern Europe, and also he's an non-resident scholar in economic policy program at the Carnegie Moscow Center. His research focuses on Russia's economy, the Eastern Economic Union, and the further of Russia's economic relations with the European Union. Hello, Andrej Movchan.
Hi, and good afternoon.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna start with the first question. And before we start our question, I'm gonna explain our spectators and for more understanding, gonna watch us what we're gonna research. We're gonna explore the topic Russia's influence nowadays in terms of last events. So the first question regarding Russia's northern territories and Japan. As far as we know, there are some discrepancies and some dispute territories, especially in terms they have a new prime minister, and also he mentioned that he would like to solve that question strictly with a hold the huge grip on especially regarding these territories, Kuril Island, Itapur, and a number of other dispute territories. What other risks we have to anticipate, and is it only disturbing for international security in general?
First of all, I have to make a disclaimer that I'm pretending to be pretty much proficient in economy, but I'm a layman in politics. I never dealt in the political sciences in my career, and all I can say about the politics is sort of a derivative from the views which I have on the global economy. Given that fact, my answer with regards to the Russian-Japanese conflict around the territories would also have an economic background. And since the economic background of this dispute is not substantial, the only economic reason for holding the conflict is the fishing territories, the waters where the ships of both countries can fish without paying the custom duties. I wouldn't see a big contradiction in the positions of the countries. On the other hand, internal policies are much more important here than the external policies. Internally, Russia is very vulnerable, very sensitive to the territorial issues. The idea of giving up territories, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where much of the territories was given up, is painful for the citizens of the country. And whenever and wherever you run the polls with regards to that question, the vast majority of the voters in the country are against any idea of the decreasing of the territory of the country, regardless of whether there are rocks in the Japanese Sea or wastelands and steppe in the eastern part of Ukraine or even the Crimea Island. Russians are generally against any aggressions and against any invasions. They take the defensive position, but whenever it does not concern the retention of the territories they believe belong to Russia. With that regard, it will be very hard to sell to the Russian population of the idea that Russia has to step down from these territories and allow Japan to regain the islands. On the other hand, the Japanese population is inclined with the territories issue due to the obvious reasons. Japan is very limited in terms of territories, and much of the territory of Japan Islands is inhabitable by the nature of the landscape, and the population of Japan is close to that of Russia, while Russia is 10 times bigger in terms of the land plot. With that regard, the population in Japan will not accept any easiness of the position. Japan wants all the islands back. And as I just said, Russians would not approve the governmental actions with regards to allowing Japan to take any of these islands. The spread in positions is from 0 to 1. There is no common ground, and I wouldn't expect any developments on that front in the near future. At the same time, the trade relations, the economic relations, and the political relations between Russia and Japan are quite good and sustainably good, and none of the leaders of the countries would spoil them for an attempt of solving something which is definitely unsolvable for the time being. Given that, I would not expect any progress on the negotiations, and I would not expect any country to make a decisive move in the negotiations, being afraid of the consequences of such a move. And obviously, I would not expect any military tensions, again, given the fact that the relations between the countries are stable and fruitful for both the countries.
I see. So can we say right now it's not a problem? So there are some tensions, but it's not a significant problem. We maybe like elaborate a little bit further in a like real conflict, military conflict. So basically, it's just like for political score discussion topic. So it's not the problem and not crucial point that has to be solved immediately, right?
No, there is nothing to do using the military force on the side of Russia, because Russia holds the islands. There is no territory Russia need to conquer in simple words. And I doubt Japan would employ any military force in here, taking into account the necessity of the relations with Russia, the leverage against China that these relations can give Japan, and the nuclear weapons Russia has. In few words, I would not expect any hot continuation of the discussions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so let's talk about Ukraine. As far as we know, there are some problem, actually huge problem in eastern part of Ukraine, and most of the countries attach that problem to Russia interfering. As you know, the conflict in eastern Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine remains unsolved. And in terms of these, the question is, will it be a conflict within time bomb effects? Will it be like completely frozen in some point future? Will be there's going to be a huge potential war or like very tense pressure from Russia's side on Ukraine?
Well, unlike the Russian-Japanese problem, this problem is mostly economical. If we discount for the highly political and very theoretical question of buffer territories between the NATO and Russian forces. So this theme is being actively discussed within the military circles in Russia. It is rather illusional, given the fact that we have Turkey in the south and Baltics in the north. These borderlands, these bufferlands, are probably not of big significance for the real defense strategy of Russia. But the discourse persists, and people in military, they're still discussing issues related to the potential joining of Ukraine into the NATO alliance as a potential hostile action from the NATO. Apart from that, the rest is purely economical, and the initial reason of the conflict is purely economical, and it lies within the Ukrainian structure of the economy. The East suffers from the current structure of the Ukrainian economy. The East is very resource-driven, and traditionally it was subsidized because of the pure organization of the economic structure within the region and within the Ukraine itself. The East tended to be economically aligned with Russia, with Russia being the major sponsor of the economy there, and the major user of the resources of the territory. And no surprise that many people were looking at Russia as a closer early than the Ukrainian Kiev and the Western Ukraine. The fact that the conflict converted into the military stand, of course, is due to the Russian involvement in the conflict. With Russian neutrality, it probably would not be that, but the economic problems would not go away. As of today, the region is more or less autonomous. The economic situation in the region is catastrophic. It holds based on Russian subsidies almost entirely. In certain sense, the existence of such situation is beneficial for both the Ukrainian government and the Russian government as well. Russian government, the management of Russia pretends they have a leverage against the West, threatening the West with the potential of the military invasion. The Ukrainian government actually does the same. They have the leverage over the West, threatening the West with the Russian invasion into Ukraine. My impression is, I'm not sure here, but my impression is that a kind of collective West is tired of the situation and does not care too much about what happens in the eastern Ukraine. Generally and traditionally, as surprising as could be, the West considers Ukraine as part of the Russian territory of influence, as Russia does. No one has real intention to acquire that part of the world and deal with the problems arising from that. It was pretty much enough to acquire Bulgaria and Romania into the European Union to understand that it's much harder to assimilate such countries than to acquire them formally. And because of that, in reality, whatever happens in the east of Ukraine, the West would probably abstain from the massive counteraction. And given that, and understanding that Russia would not, again, it's my subjective opinion, and it's based on logic, not based on emotions, which can prevail. Russia would not activate its forces to commence the invasion, just because whenever you commence the invasion, you lose the leverage you have with a threat. Threats executed no longer work. Accumulating forces on the border, sending signals, threatening, discussing, offering solutions is a good way of getting to the results Russians want to get. Invading will decrease the popularity of the Russian government within Russian people, because it inevitably will send coffins back to the country. It is a waste of money, and all military operations are a great waste of money. And now after the COVID, and through the COVID, and after the reduction of the GDP, and seeing the constant reduction in the personal income, the household incomes of the country, it would be unwise to commence such an invasion. And then again, the most important fact is that while now Russia uses the leverage and uses the leverage extensively, it will lose that leverage with the invasion, regardless of how the invasion goes. And if the invasion is successful, you take huge economic obligations on your shoulders, because you need to feed the regions which are devastated by the economic policy of the last years in Ukraine and the invasion itself. So being short, I don't think anything substantial will happen. The tensions will continue. The political tensions will continue for quite a while. I wouldn't think that the conflict can be solved until the dramatic changes in the Russian political society.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna hope that that conflict will stay in the political frame and never be real hot. So the next question about Russia northern pretended territories. So they try to extend it, especially the Arctic program, Northern Sea Road, and so on. So is it entire infrastructure development, or it's for capturing appropriation, like additional territory and apparently resources. What to prepare for, what to expect in general?
And economically speaking, Russian move to the northern territories is easily understandable. On the surface, it's the search for the new sources of mineral resources. Important for Russia because the Russian economy is entirely dependent on the exports of mineral resources. And because it's entirely dependent on the export of mineral resources, obviously Russia needs more trade ways, and the northern trade way is very important in that sense. It decreases the time of the delivery of the resources from the northern part of Russian Siberia to the outer world. And on the other hand, and one level deeper underneath, the development of anything in Arctic demands huge amount of the resources. And it is possible to make huge amounts of profits on delivering that, being financed by the budget. We know that the Russian economy in reality is based on a feudal system of benefiting from the huge Russian budgets by a limited number of people. And these people definitely use all the ways possible to develop new projects, to be fed from the Russian government, Russian budget, and make their profits, and subsequently move these profits abroad. So the Arctic projects are ideal for that. There are huge balances and the huge budgets, and it's very hard to check how the money is spent. It's very hard to understand the horizons and the limits of these projects. The exploration projects demand enormous logistical projects. Logistical products demand enormous IT support and technological and infrastructural projects. And it may make you a billionaire by itself. With that regard, Arctics would be the topic and the point. Russian elites will develop the issue even when everybody else understands that the cost of the projects is prohibitive and there is no profit in exploiting the resources in that region.
Yeah, and also my colleague has some questions for you as well. So Alessio, please.
Yeah, of course. Well, right now I think I will change. I totally change the subject since we spoke about war and other things. But right now I want to speak about the G20. Okay, as we all know, there has been this summit like a month ago, and one of the main topics was the rise of power of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Okay, but while the European states have reached an agreement on humanitarian aid to the Afghan people, we had a different kind of summit between Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, and Taliban representatives that have organized this summit that have taken place in the 20th of October. Okay, so we can say that Russia is taking distance from European Union, and what this might lead to. What do you think?
First of all, we have to admit that Russian policy towards the regimes in different countries was always based on real politics, not on the political principles of any kind. Russia is very omnivorous in terms of who to deal with. Generally, Russia admits and welcomes the regimes who are supportive to Russia and who want to cooperate. Regardless of what are the internal policies of these regimes. We've seen it in Syria just recently. The idea that Russia cooperates with the third-party countries, with the third world countries, as opposed to cooperating with the European Union is paramount. Since 2012, probably, the major paradigm of the Russian politics is based on inability to fruitfully cooperate with the modern Western regimes, with the US and Europe. And since that, Russia finds to find friends wherever it's possible. I wouldn't say that it's economically beneficial. Our friendship with Venezuela led to losses. Our friendship with Syria leads to losses. Our friendship with Northern Korea leads to losses. But the major rule prevails. We are friends against the West rather than being friends for something else. With that regard, the more European countries would be hostile to Taliban, the more Russia would try to make relations with the country and with the government, with the modern government of Afghanistan, specifically because it is pretty clear now that Taliban is the movement that can hold and control Afghanistan for a long time. And Russia is not alone on that path. It seems like Iran and China and other countries of the sort, they act pretty much in the same direction, and they acknowledge Taliban not because Taliban provides the policies that they like, but rather because Taliban is firm and can hold the country and can suppress the opposition and will actually make decisions on behalf of the country, regardless of what Western democracies want to see in Afghanistan now. The position is even stronger because everybody understands that neither the United States nor Europe have strength or stamina or intention to reconquer Afghanistan and make it the second Iraq. The pain from the Iraqi campaign is too much, and everybody understands that it should not be repeated at any cost, specifically at the cost of the population in Afghanistan. Given that, Russia would definitely develop the relations. The trade relations would follow. Maybe it will be the relations in terms of the capital investments and construction, helping Taliban establish the infrastructure within the country. In exchange, Russia will demand the security of the northern borders of Afghanistan, the promise that Taliban would not spread beyond the current border, specifically in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. I have no comments with regards to what extent we can trust the word of Taliban, but it seems that in Kremlin, the trust is established.
Well, I'd like to ask you just one last question that is about another totally different subject, and is about fuels. Okay, right now we unfortunately have a pretty problematic surge in gas prices here in Europe, and but Putin said that is due to the electricity deficit. Okay, and we still have to understand who is right and who is wrong in this how can I say, in this discussion. But this is leading the transcontinental giant to clash with all those countries who benefit from the production of on the subject of fuels. Okay, so how do you think the geopolitical weight of the Russian Federation will change due to this enormous need for the blue fuel by all these countries that cannot produce it for themselves?
Well, maybe we start a little bit before what happened this year. We'll start like 4 to 5 years back in the history, when two major actions were undertaken by the European Union and European countries in general. The first one is the start of the climate fighting the climate change, which inevitably should have resulted in the change in the spectrum of the fuels used and employed. Initially, the economic reason for that fight was in the attempt to level the level of the costs in between the European countries and the developing countries. fighting the inequality in the production prices of the goods in these countries. Because the production prices were much lower in China and the countries of the region, Europe became more and more dependent on China and the countries in terms of the production. And within Europe itself, the production was decreasing, and it made social problems within the countries. And the idea was to impose stricter regulations in terms of the cleanliness of the energy used and affect the cost of production in the Southwestern Asia to allow Europe to balance the current accounts and the import-export operations. Based on that, the climate change program was implemented. The countries of the world were demanded to pay for their dirty fuels or to change their fuels composition. And eventually, big countries like China started to move in that direction. Gradually, and in certain circumstances, abruptly refusing from using coal as the most polluting type of the fuel. On the other hand, Europe started to try to refuse from the gas dependency from Russia, mostly because of the situation with the Ukraine, feeling vulnerable to the will of the Kremlin. And they started to become more and more dependent on the LNG, on the liquefied gas sent overseas from the America. The major producer of the liquefied gas is still America, and the best trade routes for the liquefied gas are those through the Atlantics. So we came to 2021 with two of these tendencies being dramatically developed. And once the first one started to really work, China started to refuse from the coal and using the ever increasing amounts of gas. The volumes of the LNG or the liquefied gas started to deviate to China and to Chinese region rather than to Europe, because delivering them to China was even easier through the Pacific, and the prices went up, and Chinese refusing from coal were able to pay more for the liquefied gas. Because of that, because through the pandemics, Europe was buying less gas from Russia than it could have been possible, because nobody expected the gas to be used extensively through the season of 2021. And because of the fact that LNG deviated from the European market, Europe faced the increasing deficit of the gas. This deficit of the gas was pretty much like the deficit of the microchips, which all the world experienced recently. The automotive companies, let me deviate from the topic for a moment. The automotive companies facing the deficit of the microchips decreased the production of the cars, which immediately resulted in the surge of the prices of the cars on the international market. Facing the surge of the prices, the automotive companies calculated the results and saw that the surge of the prices brought them profits instead of bringing them losses. And they decided to deliberately decrease the output, which was a very natural move in terms of maximizing the profits. The same thing did the Gazprom when they saw how the prices of gas increased in response to the decreasing of the volumes consumed. Gazprom decided to cut off the transportation of the gas to Europe in order to maintain high prices. The total revenue Gazprom gets at the limited volumes is now higher than it got before with all the volumes employed. And Gazprom, actually, as all the automotive companies through the world, will continue doing that unless it sees that Europe is able to substitute the amounts the Gazprom does not deliver to Europe by other sources. Substituting them would be very high, would be very, very, very hard, because LNG is very high in price, and most of the LNG now goes to China. because China is fighting the coal dependency, because Europe demanded China to fight the coal dependency, and because of that, the price for gas would probably stay quite high for a while, and Gazprom will play a very natural game in that play, and it's very hard to blame Gazprom for being economically efficient for itself. Then, because of that, Europe would probably go to Russia to negotiate in an attempt to make Gazprom sacrifice part of the profits and sell more gas. And Russia will definitely demand something in exchange. The point one would be the Nord Stream approval. And the Nord Stream second stage approval will mean that Russia can deviate the streams from going through Ukraine to going through the Baltic Sea. And this will increase the tensions with Ukraine. And obviously, this wouldn't be just one demand. There would be others. Some of them will concern Ukraine. Some of them will concern the international sanctions. Some of them will concern the position of the European Union towards the Middle East and Syria in particular. And we have to admit that Russia has the upper hand here because of the actions that Europe undertook in the years before. The situation will resolve over time, of course, but not in the nearest future.
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Andrej, thank you. Really appreciate you for your experience, for sharing this, your opinion on these key things. This just really helps us to understand main key events in the world, and really thank you for helping in our research.
You're
Your
welcome.
opinion was really significant for us, and it's really helpful. Thank you for participation in ITSS Verona video podcast.
Thank you indeed.